sporadic moments of violence where people were fighting, and that's at least stopped since the show of force has happened. We haven't seen that same little bit of violence erupt here. They're just very methodically pushing this remaining group out of the quad area and trying to get them to disperse to create some period of separation between the two groups to stop the fighting between the two. And again, if you're just joining us, this is live coverage of UCLA. CHP and LAPD now intervening in the protests that were happening on the campus of UCLA, both between groups of pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli groups that erupted in violence earlier tonight. And a show of force between CHP and LAPD has kind of quelled that violence, and they are now creating some separation between the two groups to stop the fighting that was occurring. And we've gotten to a point here where they've pushed this group of demonstrators into this corner, and they're trying to get them to disperse along this corridor here. And some of them are still just maintaining where they want to stay. Let's push a little bit to the west, Tyler, just so I can see both ends of this here. Just a tiny bit here, thank you. Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to see what we were looking at on the other end here. Still see LAPD, still have CHP, and they're still maintaining that corridor where they're letting people walk out. Yeah, they confirmed they'll be there at 4. Got it. We'll be all set. Yeah, we should have enough fuel for that. The big question here is you see LAPD and CHP removing a group of the protests, but the elephant in the room going to be, what are they going to do with this encampment? How are they going to handle that? I don't anticipate them removing this entrenched encampment throughout the morning. So we're going to have to see what's going to happen with the number of tents here that are going to remain on the campus, and the plan later on to remove that. I anticipate a long morning ahead of us, at least for now, with separation of the two groups. The violence or the clashes between them has stopped, and so that's great to see. Still no arrest, and still CHP doing what they're doing here is just pushing the group further and further off the quad. Got it. Well, here comes another group of CHP officers to reinforce that first group. They're moving around a little bit, and they're going to come and actually push the rest of this group. Is their plan. They're trying to push this group out peacefully to separate the two groups. And just a quick look, we still see a number of law enforcement officers continuing to pour in. As I mentioned before, LAPD, CHP, and also LA County Sheriffs. And the LA County Sheriffs have a contingency, but it seems like they are just waiting to make sure and see what is going to happen with the current situation. We see a big force of LAPD officers more or less just supporting the CHP effort at this point. And there's also a mix of UCLA's public safety department in there as well. So large law enforcement presence. You see them now. There's a number of strategy missions going on and talking, and they are just trying to resolve this as peacefully as possible. Here again, another group of CHP officers being deployed near the front of the line here. Okay, here's CHP's pushing through and now moving people throughout to try to push them out of this area. You can see a large group that was standing there kind of just waiting, now exiting the quad area. CHP just strengthening their lines here. Still no arrest scene. You still see a number of supporters or number of this group still on this side of the tents. And remember, they've created a makeshift barrier in between here with plywood and barriers and pallets. So the barrier still stands. It was in the about an hour ago or so, there was a number of pieces of that barrier that were being torn away or torn down, and there was a number of counter protesters or protesters taking them over here and dumping it and just trying to break down the barrier as much as they could. However, that has now stopped since the presence of law enforcement has arrived on scene, and the clashes between the two groups have stopped. So the entrenched encampment, the pro-Palestinian side of this event, is still here. They're still on this side with a number of tents and a number of, they basically fortified their area, you could see, with pallets and just anything that could be found. And here we have CHP closing out the gap. Like mentioned before, they're letting people disperse on their own through this corridor, and now they've circled the gap. They've come all the way down, they've cleared the quad, and now they're pushing people back to the south to just clear the quad altogether. They've also have a line or a skirmish line, a contingency, blocking off the entrances back into the quad. So we've seen CHP methodically come through this quad and hold their line. Very peaceful, no arrests being made, no clashes between the law enforcement officers and protesters. They're just very slowly pushing people out of the quad and separating the two groups. Yeah, perfect. See a number of CHP and LAPD officers still continuing to move in groups. You can see they were prepared to make arrests. Those big white bundles you see at their waist are plastic handcuffs used often in these situations. And here they are just pushing that group through the quad and backfilling and supporting, just keeping it closed down. Copy that, and just been told by the booth that if you're joining us here live on ABC 7 and ABC streaming channels, on the right side of your screen you see a live ground shot courtesy of Reuters, and on the left side of the screen you see us up here in Air 7 with continuous coverage over the situation unfolding at UCLA. LAPD and CHP officers doing the best they can to disperse the two entities or separate the two crowds of protesters from each other as peacefully as they can. And just as they come around, we'll give them a couple minutes. They're being blocked on my shot by a tree, but we will shortly come in and see where CHP's goal was to enter the quad and peacefully use the skirmish line just to push the protesters out of the quad. As I said earlier, you see a line of officers lining this walkway here. They're using this walkway as an exit to the quad, and they're slowly but surely just pushing the protesters out of the quad along that way so they could set a space or area between the two protesters. Yeah, perfect. Yep. And we're going to move around. A little weather coming in here. Big thanks to my pilot, Tyler, doing a great job early here. Thanks for joining us. And as before mentioned, here's the CHP skirmish line. And this is the last group of pro-Israeli protesters that were on this side, that they're just making space between the two groups. And you can see very slowly but methodically, CHP has done an excellent job of just maintaining the peace and just moving people out of the way rather than any signs of force or any signs of people getting arrested. It's more just create space between the two groups to stop any of the conflict that was happening between the two groups. And here's a good shot of what I was talking about earlier. Here's the makeshift barrier that was created with all types of different construction materials. Pallets, there's a number of just stanchions there, plywood material, whatever can be found that was utilized to create a barrier between the two groups. That was just being picked up and thrown earlier, well, just a couple hours ago when we were seeing this live on ABC, and we had coverage of the two groups that actually erupted in a bit of conflict and violence between the two. And you see a mix of CHP and UCLA PD or UCLA public safety members down there. There was a question that came about earlier, why the CHP? UCLA is a state school, so ultimate law enforcement or authority will fall in lines for the CHP. And so that's why you see CHP active on the campus. But they are being supported by LAPD. You'll see LAPDs down here in the black uniforms, CHP wearing the tan uniforms. And the LAPD has a big force of uniformed personnel here supporting the CHP efforts as the CHP continues to clear this area. Once again, this is the last piece of the contingency that was left on the quad, and CHP has met their goal. Initially, when we first got on scene, we came on a few hours ago just to try to keep with this continuous coverage. There was a clash here where the two groups met, and since then, CHP has come in and created the space on the quad in between the two groups, and essentially just escorted the group out and created a barrier between the two to stop any forms of violence. And now you can see LAPD contingency right behind them and just reinforcing those skirmish lines to make sure that everybody is just moving out here. Again, let me show you the number of law enforcement officers that are here at UCLA is quite impressive. And just as I said that, you could see in our ground shot just there was some shots of those actual ground units that were lined up along the outskirts here. And you see a big contingency of officers. The officer you just saw on your right-hand screen with less lethal force, none of that has been used here. Yet to see any tear gas or any forms of crowd control measures, anything like that. It's just been a series of movement of people through a show of force. And as you can see, LAPD has now reinforced that skirmish line, and they have kept the people out of the quad. And CHP is now falling back and reconciling their units to see where they could be to push the people out of the quad area. And now LAPD has reinforced that line, and now everybody has exited the quad, as that was their plan from the start tonight, to just try to create some space and create some peace in between the two groups. I got it. It'll probably be a clean handoff. You know, they'll get up at 4, and then right when they come, so we should be able to. We'll try to hold out until we just flip flop. Yeah, it's right over Hollywood. So kind of like K-Joy. Yeah. And back with us out here live at UCLA, you could see still what CHP has done is cleared the quad of all protesters on this side. This was the pro-Israeli side. The pro-Palestinian side of this conflict or this protest are encamped in these tents here. And you see a contingency of LAPD holding down one side of the quad. You see LAPD and CHP holding down the other side of the quad. The goal was to come in and clear this quad area to stop the conflict between the two groups, and we've watched that methodically happen over the last hour. The last group of people we see still here are in this corner where they're still kind of in discussion. LAPD has reinforced this area, CHP has pulled back, but still a large contingency of officers from CHP, LAPD, as well as UCLA's Public Safety Department. And you see a number of people just chanting and talking still. But no arrests that we've seen yet. The officers were all here, ready to go, and we have yet to see any arrests. And still a large contingency of officers off camera that we've seen preparing to come in just in case they were needed. Yeah, I think we could stay here for that. What do you think, Tyler, about 15 minutes on station? Yeah, about 15 minutes on station we could do from now. So about 4:05, we'll need to start walking out. And here you see, like mentioned in the tan, these are CHP officers. They're now reinforcing the line behind LAPD as well. And they're just keeping people out of this quad. Yeah, go ahead. We could save a little fuel. We're still the only ones here. Live continuous coverage. As we get closer to the morning, I've seen a lot more activity here in the encampment. They actually have food set up. They're heavily entrenched in there, so you see a lot more movement going on that side, and you see this area just now completely clear. And excuse us as we orbit through this little bit of fog here, a little bit of marine layer coming on here to the Westwood area. On very interesting. Now we see the main line of officers. Basically, they're now rotating. I hear them on their frequency here, where they're going to now CHP will step in, give the LAPD officers a bit of a break or a breather, and so you're going to see this rotate through with a number of these officers that are holding these skirmish lines. So you saw LAPD now walking back and taking a break while CHP moved in to support and fill those positions, just holding this whole quad area. And again, showing you here's a number of the building materials that were stripped away from that area in between where people were at earlier. And all those building materials were being grabbed and picked up and taken back to an area. So you could see initially this was highly fortified with a number of building materials. It has since been torn down in a number of areas in an attempt to break this barrier between the two groups. So majority of it still up and still in place. And there we see, again, LAPD contingency just holding all access to this quad from anybody entering. You can keep it a little bit wider, Tyler. Got it. Still streaming, and we'll be live at the top of the floor. Got it, got it. And those of you still with us here, all of our streaming platforms on ABC, we're still here with live continuous coverage over UCLA. We're getting into our 4 o'clock hour. We'll be live on ABC and abc.com. So thank you for staying with us, and we'll be with you back live on TV. Let's try to get back over there a little quicker, just because we're going to be live in a minute or so. And, copy. Good right here. Just hold it till they come off this story, and then we'll jam. Gabe, we're going to head back to Van Nuys for fuel.